Well, thank you, Teresa and Blair and all the family here at Art Spirits Gallery for the chance to be with you. Always look forward for a trip to Coeur d'Alene. And so grateful that you're carving out a little time on a Saturday morning to join us, because I know you have, especially in this part of the country, you have lots of other opportunities and things to do and say. And so thrilled that you carve out a little time to be with us. It's always a special honor to be in Catherine's presence here. She is such an enriching person in my family's life, my life personally. And if you have anything to share here formally, feel free. If we didn't really talk about the format here, but if you wanted to say a few words at the outset here, and then I can move into my part. And while you're at it, I would appreciate permission to show some of your images here. Okay. Thanks. She's been emailing me things here. We've been in touch for the last year and a half, and so happy to showcase some special things that we've done here. So please,
honored that you came to speak with us and that you have participated in my artistic growth and journey. I started falling in love with the blues when I first moved here in 2003 for a job assignment with my husband, and at that time I took one little son. And one of the reasons we actually moved here is because he took the job with Itron, and in our whole process of making a decision to move here, he told me about the blues. He said, you have to see the Coeur Prairie, you have to go down and see the blues, and I had never heard of it prior to that option of moving out here. And when I saw it, I just fell absolutely in love. So I happened to move up to Coeur, didn't live too far from Cattails, and my neighbor there has a very small art gallery, and she told me about Steve Gibbs. And she said, you need to go see Steve. And she was trying to help me acclimate and be a part of the community. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go up there and do that, and I did that. And he liked my work. I was really pleased. I came in and I was drawing charcoals of Coeur Prairie and making connections between what I saw in that prairie, the constant changing fields, and thinking about the work and the innovation and the courage and the risk-taking that happened on those fields. I love the formalities of those fields and the light and the changing season and everything that affected it. And so I drew all about that for a while. And then my husband had a job change. And we moved to Europe for a little while, and I did a European series, and then we came back. And then we had another job change, and I moved to St. Louis. And all this while I'm moving my things around, I had never met the Scheuerman family. And there was this really chance opportunity. I saw a photograph that Karen Mobley had posted through Facebook. And it happened to be a photo by Tom Scheuerman. And the minute I looked at it, and I'm sitting in the winter in St. Louis, I was thinking, oh my gosh, that's the Palouse. And he was a farmer. And so I said to him, this is really awesome. I love this image. And next thing you know, over a period of time, it's 6 months later, Karen and I are going down to the Oasis, and Tom is giving us a tour. Little did I know that that connection was going to connect me to Dick and Dawn and the projects that they've been working on in this community. So, and I was thrilled. We sat down at lunch, met Dawn at a picnic table at the Oasis, and he told me all about Dick's book and things that he was working on, and it's kind of taken off from there. So Dawn actually is the one that turned me on to learning about grain in terms of what he's doing, raising the grains that are the landrace grains. So I started researching the health opportunities, the soil opportunities, the environmental impact, and I'm still learning. It's a really in-depth thing. And not only that, there's so much history, the work of farmers and heritage grains and the things that they do and the conditions they do and the risks and everything. I thought I really need to art about that. The Palouse is amazing, but there is so much more depth to the dirt here, and I'm going to dig and find out. So it's sort of an ongoing thing. I'm learning a lot. I attended Cascadia Grains Conference. I was really inspired by all the networking there, all the support of bakers, farmers, brewers, millers, distillers, all working in collaboration. And I love that sense of community building. And it fit right into what I love to do as an educator. So I taught middle school for 15 years. And then I went to teach at the Yellow Barn Studio in Washington, D.C., and I worked teaching adults drawing, and they love to draw and so forth. But in middle school teaching, I learned how to connect. We taught in a team. And so we brought in science and math and history, and it all connected into the art curriculum. And that sort of background is what made me so intensely curious about what the Scheuerman family was doing, and about the Palouse colony and the history there. And my dad always loved history, so that was another influence. And he loved rugs and collecting, and we went to all kinds of museums. So all of these sort of subconscious things sort of fed into my passion for the Palouse and wanting to learn more and to connect and reach the actual storytellers of the community. So that's how it's kind of been growing from there. And it's been a wonderful adventure, and I love it. I'm out here once a year and feel like I have a farm family that I have embraced, and they've embraced me, and it's been just such an amazing connection. So, all right, great.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you.
Yeah, Catherine referenced Brother Don, who's here, who lives down at Palouse Colony Farm. Our daughter Leanna is back here doing some recording support here, since I'm incapable of those kinds of things. And I'd also like to pay special tribute to my longtime friend Harry Schneidmiller here, Coeur d'Alene City Father, and supporter of all kinds of wonderful endeavors, humanities related. And Gary's family and ours go back to the origins, not just the Palouse colony, but those who came to this area in the late 1800s, because long before that, several generations back, in the era of Catherine the Great, the Tsarina of Russia, our families were recruited to go from Germany to the South Volga area and colonize that region. So we've been chumming around for almost 3 centuries now, and our families came a few years later than the first of our people that came to the Northwest, but it was because of what was called the Palouse colony that our people came to this region to find farmland in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So the Scheuermans and the Schneidmillers lived actually just over the hill from where the colony is located. Catherine has rendered this beautifully in an image that's on the back of the gallery here you can see later today. And so the Schneidmillers were just over the hill on the north, we were just over the hill to the east, and just terrific to have Gary here as well share in this story. Well, it's a big story, and we only have a few minutes here, so I'm going to kind of hit some of the highlights, and I hope you enjoy this merging of heritage and art and the various realms of science as well as the humanities. Where were we back in our high school, junior high teaching days, Catherine, when we could have had a wonderful tool like this to share so many of your beautiful images and others with kids? I was really taken with the quote up here that Blair and Teresa have emblazoned on the window about apparently the namesake of your gallery, Art Spirit. These are opening lines from an artist a century ago who talks about art not being something just on the outside. You know, we often think of art, whether it's Lantu or the new three-dimensional art form I was not acquainted with here, that Catherine has introduced us to, in these sublimation fabrics and incredible 3D effect. But, you know, we're used to thinking those as being objects, you know, something outside us. And the nature of this quotation is that art is really this interactive process that invigorates us personally, internally, in connection with what we're observing. So there's this reflexive aspect to art that's very invigorating and establishes a level of meaning making for us. And you know, if you go through life bouncing off the walls and just reactive, like T.S. Eliot has said, you can have the experience but miss the meaning. Isn't that shameful that people can go through an entire lifetime and not have an opportunity to step back and say, well, what's the meaning of this? And there certainly is meaning in the experience of why something then is beautiful. Why is it good? Why is it purposeful? Those are provocative questions that I hope all of us are asking ourselves. We can all make various conclusions about how you would define those, but art allows us to ask those profound questions and therefore make meaning in life. So I'll give it a try here, Teresa, and see if I can make this work one way or another. Oh, look at that.
There you go.
Do too much. Okay. This the past couple of years, I've been working on a project to tell the story. By the way, I'm violating every PowerPoint rule in this slide. You're supposed to have like 3 sentences and 8,000 point font. So bear with me. This is the only one that I've compressed all this writing in. This is a line from The Desert of Wheat. You know, when I was a kid, I have to tell you, I wasn't a big Zane Grey fan. It's all this shoot 'em up, bang up, Southwest material. And then I found out recently that Zane Grey made a trip to Spokane, Washington, back World War I era, and he was a guest of honor at the Spokane Chamber of Commerce. Somebody from Gary and my alma mater, WSU and WSC, pulled his shirt sleeve after the talk. And by the way, he was incredibly successful already by 1970. He was America's best-selling author. And quite wealthy, kind of an Ernest Hemingway of his time. Would travel the world fishing, spending all his wealth. Didn't go too well over with the family. But he was one of these persons who lived life to the fullest. And a regent, a member of the Board of Regents, I believe it was Dunn, tapped him on the shoulder after his talk and said, Mr. Gray, you have all these exciting novels you can write. You're here in the most fertile farm country of the entire continent. You want to write a book about farming. And I'm not sure how I went over at the moment, but he obviously it was the germ of an idea. And he kept thinking about this during that summer of 1917. And we know his wife and family continued ahead on the railroad to Portland and then on down to San Francisco. And he lingered. And I've had some fun trying to find out just where did he go. Evidence is he came over here, went down to Palouse country, went over to Moses Lake, went up to Elmira, Connell, Hooper, all these big cities, and started putting together this story. And I have to tell you, I have become a Zane Grey fan because this is beautifully written. I don't have time. Someday, if you're interested, Teresa, we can do a whole thing on the novel, The Desert of Wheat. It's quite a story. By the way, Harper Row, his publisher, commissioned a very prominent German artist, Kerner, to illustrate this book. And they're magnificent. I might even have one here, I'm not sure. In any event, early in the book, talking about meaning, he comes up with these lines, and I won't quote it at length here, thanks for this presentation, but this is kind of worth saying. After a while, the young man sat up, looked at the heavens, their twinkling like stars. The dreaming hills with their precious rustling wheat meant more than even a spirit could tell. How the original seeds, the original sowers, if you're like me, I'm interested in origins. You can help understand your place in the world by knowing where have things come from. The stars, the night, the dark blue of the heaven hid the secret in their impenetrableness. Beyond them was surely the answer. Material things lost their significance. They could not last, but the grain, the land, the stars, they would go on with their task. I started becoming interested in, because of our agrarian background, how did all this come to pass for us in the Northwest? See, at one point, okay, maybe I do need to go to the right. Okay. And so, being a farm kid, and like Catherine, spending time in education, had some teacher workshops that I was doing. By the way, I'm hugely interested in interdisciplinary studies, and I've heard Katherine talk before a little about integrated education, and this is absolutely the key to a better tomorrow. And why more folks haven't understood this, I have my own reasons, but I've seen them work with the absolute most challenging populations of urban city high school kids in Seattle who I've taught, and have worked in a Journeys curriculum that has brought new life to them. That and a journey related to the origin of agriculture came to my mind, totally unknown, because putting on a workshop over at Fort Nisqually, I just needed a big place to house a bunch of teachers. And so they were there, we finished this workshop, and the head of the museum over in Tacoma, if you've been to Fort Nisqually, it's Hudson's Bay Post that was affiliated with posts that were out here in Coeur d'Alene country, Kootenai country, Fort Colville. The guy said, you know, we have the original journals here, Dick, so I know you're interested in history, so, you know, before you leave, feel free to take a look. So well, okay, so I cranked that up and all that interesting. But you know, took a look at these things, and it's like, whatever, the company harvested 15 bushels of red wheat, and then a few pages later, it's yellow wheat, and it's white wheat. And I finally went up to the head of the museum there, and I said, I thought this was a fur trading post, and they're raising grain all over the place. And he said, oh yeah, no, these were farm people early on. And that was interesting to me, because I am interested in history, and I had already always associated Northwest agriculture with our rugged American Oregon Trail pioneers in the 1840s and 50s. But these dates were 1820s, 1830, a generation before Americans ever settled in the Northwest. There were farmers because of the very visionary-minded Sir George Simpson, right there in that white hat, coming out here in 1825 and telling this far-flung Hudson's Bay trading empire. By the way, this guy was a globalist long before 21st century talking about global trade. The Hudson's Bay Company, the East India Company, the British had this world empire, and they were shipping stuff back and forth all over the place. And Sir George Simpson, a very forward-thinking, bright trader, entrepreneur, said, enough of sending you guys hamburgers all the time. You've got to feed yourself. You're half a world away from London here. What you can't see in this image is a little pot, a wooden bucket of grain that he brought. And that grain was the reference I shared with you in the journals to white wheat. This took about a year and a half of a detective hunt. Many of you have farm backgrounds, so you know references like white wheat typically is a pastry grain. Red wheat is a bread grain. Yellow wheat can kind of be a little bit of both. And there are dozens of varieties of those colors. You really have to do some investigating if you want to find, okay, just what white wheat are we talking about? And after about a year and a half, once again, because of the WSU connection, the chief grain breeder at WSU for many years, Steve Jones, had become a friend through a whole different set of circumstances that we'll be telling you about. And I called him up, and I said, okay, I'm getting close here on determining what the actual varieties are. And I just had the thought occur to me that, gee, maybe some of the seed germplasm is still available. Do you think so? And he said, well, I don't know. We can give it a try and let me know if you get the specific variety, which we ultimately did. It had been nicknamed Hudson's Bay wheat, no big surprise, and then peeled back through a whole series of investigations the fact that it was in fact English white llamas wheat. And llamas is named for, it's a holy day. It comes from the word loaf mass, because the first grain that was harvested ceremonially on August 1st in southern England back in medieval times was brought to the church to be made into communion bread. And that name has continued through early modern times. And that is the grain that Sir George Simpson brought. We've started raising it. We have not actually found a market for this, and it's so disappointing to me because a lot of people are interested in bread grains, but they're less interested in soft white wheats, which you can blend. So I'd like to launch a little all-purpose thing through our PalouseHeritage.com if you want to go there and find more detail on this. This is where it was first milled. This is the first grain mill ever in the inland Pacific Northwest, and it's not all that far from here. So if some of you are off on vacation plans, this is in our part of the country. This is up in Fort Colville, which is today present Kettle Falls. And my son Carl and I were off at a family gathering just this past week. And I had passed this before, but you know, when you got all the kids and grandkids and everybody else in towing a great caravan, they get a little tired of Grandpa saying, let's stop and see this really interesting thing. So I had never really had a chance to explore there. So Carl was with me just, 3 days ago, I guess. And so we stopped. Fortunately, there is a marker here. And this corner right here is where that mill was. And I am told the original stones that ground that grain are sitting just across the way at the Mack Museum in Spokane. And so I'm on a trek to see if we can find those. So here we are, Spokane Coeur Lane. This is on the main highway. This was the great brigade trails that came east-west with the Hudson's Bay Company. Hudson Bay was headquartered back in York Factory on the Great Lakes. And so they come across Canada, then come down here on the Upper Columbia. David Thompson would actually come up here, Post Falls, Coeur d'Alene area. And they would then move down to what was Fort Walla Walla, which is actually down where Wallula is, not where the city of Walla Walla is. And then come down to Port Vancouver. So within about 10 years of Sir George Simpson's coming in 1825, on the first of two circumnavigations, by the way. Can you imagine a guy going around the world in 1820? He established farms in all of these places. So they were already thriving by the time most of the American immigration became really a burgeoning phenomenon in the 1840s and 1850s. We've been asking the question, why is any of this significant to restore? I mean, America and the Northwest in particular, there's large articles this week, by the way, in the Spokane's papers and Atlantic and others about global trade, and how dependent in particular the Northwest is. We export 90% of the grain from Idaho and Washington and Oregon abroad. And our farmers are pretty good with it, aren't they? You know, we have high yields and a lot of uncertainty. And the reason it's been in the news a lot, of course, is because there's concern about how recent problems with international trade because of these potential tariff wars are threatening sales. We've been interested in finding commercially viable models of restorative agriculture so that we can borrow from both traditions. We can borrow from what's good about the landrace or pre-hybridized varieties because they're very healthy and unusually so, I will tell you. Don't take it from me, take it from analyses of what compares the modern to the more traditional, but also incorporating modern approaches to technology that can make a lot of labor-saving opportunities available to us. And so in this way, we kind of blend the new and the old traditions to do something that's healthy and hopefully also commercially viable. So a few questions about that. First of all, why is it worthwhile to do this? I've got a picture of my grandson, Zachary, there, who caught his first fish, by the way, on Tuesday at Coeur Lake. Proudest guy in the after 4 years of waiting. And I wrote on there, Zachary, Century 21, and big numbers. I have a memory, and I'll date myself, and here I'm interested in history, and I can't tell you for sure if the Seattle World's Fair was 1962 or a year earlier. I think it was 62. I remember going to Seattle. It was my first big trip over the mountains, like going to another world over there. And I have a few memories of that. I was a young kid at the time. But I'll tell you one thing that really sticks out in my brain. They had a gymnasium-sized type building. I think it's the Seattle Center, what is today the Seattle Center. And some of you might be able to correct me if you were there at the Seattle World Fair. But there was this enormous cage. There was just this cage looked to me like it was the size of a football stadium. And inside, they had 1 million commemorative coins of Century 21. They wanted to have a physical expression of what a million was. And so, I mean, wow, pretty impressive to me. That's 1 million coins in there. No wonder it's the size of the stadium. It was such a big number that sometimes, you know, we get lost with the size of things like that. When I pulled one out and looked at it, you know, I could see very interesting things inscribed and everything's written. But when I just looked at this gross number, it was overwhelming. It was overwhelming to me. And, you know, when I reflect on that and I think about what's going on today in the world, it impresses me with the significance not only of opportunity but also challenges for which we need to find solutions. And I'll give you one example. Katherine referenced her time teaching. And I enjoy working with young people. And for many years I directed the Masters of Teaching program at Seattle Pacific University. And last year, as in many years, the last couple of years, I would ask our candidates, what is the most important thing that has happened in the world in this past year? I mean, for crying out loud, shouldn't we be at least saying something about that to kids today? I mean, let me tell you, we got mountains of student learning objectives that by law, you know, we're supposed to share with kids. Wouldn't you think the most important thing in the world ought to be close to the top? And by the way, we'd all get lots of answers, right? And depending on your perspective, I mean, it's not an absolute right or wrong thing. Hey, there's elections and new people, new administrations, and who won the Super Bowl, and, you know, I don't know, all kinds of cool stuff. I guess we do most important. And I said to them, I'll tell you what I think. I'll tell you what I think. Me, my nomination. Most important. The largest living organism in the planet was declared threatened and dying. I saw it in the corner of some paper. I mean, it was not the headline. I mean, it was like page 8, lower left-hand corner. The Great Barrier Reef off Australia was found to be dying. I said to them, I think that's the biggest story. That for whatever reason, natural or unnatural, the largest living thing on the planet is dying. You suppose we ought to think about that for a minute? What's the relevance? Well, the scientists actually haven't found out for sure. But one thing they know is that we have been pouring in massive amounts of chemical inputs into the world oceans, largely associated with high-input agriculture that is affecting the quality of life on the planet. These are actually dead zones. Isn't it horrible to think of a phrase like dead zone off the mouths of our largest rivers? So is it possible? By the way, when I hear those big things, it's also kind of lost, isn't it? Oh, okay, largest thing on the planet dying. Okay, well, page 6, what's on the sports page? There's kind of a danger in that, isn't it? I think it's worth thinking about what is significant. Why is this worthwhile? Well, when you consider questions like this, you get to meet really interesting people like Katherine Nelson, who comes to the annual WSU grain gatherings all the way from Baltimore, D.C. area, and shares with others the art forms that she has that causes us to, in the spirit of art spirit, reflect on what's happening in the real world and what can we do to preserve what's good and not allow it to be threatened in ways that could be destructive. Look at these beautiful works of art she shared with us here. People like Steve Lyon, who found out where that germplasm was so that we can revive the oldest grains. And Steve Jones, his associate there, who did so much work on our behalf to help us find these early landrace grains. By the way, landrace simply means native grains. Land, it's a German expression, so it's lands. There were thousands of lands, particular regions where grains had adapted to over the last 50,000 years. Today, sadly, there's only a handful that really are the cornucopia for what most grain production is. And so we've been seeking to find those that enrich in the ways fine wines give us a whole palette of choice when you go into a nice restaurant. You don't just say, hey, do you have a colored wine? You know, do you have a red wine? You know, well, no, there's like 20 kinds of red wine. But today, if you get a sack of flour, you know, it just says gold medal, all purpose. You know, but you know what? There are distinctions to red May and yellow Breton and the grain Gary and my people brought from Russia. Turkey red, holy cow, it's the best tasting bread in the world. Landrace rye, all of these. We're trying to, this sounds a little boastful, but let me tell you, my expectations so far have been fairly minimal when we move into the world of American culinary habits, because we're very used to cheap food in America and clear beer, by the way. We travel to Europe, and you know the bread is gray or brown, and it's fibrous, and the beers are cloudy, and that's good for you. And so it's been something of a heavy lift to acquaint the American food public with the fact that there are better ways to do things that are much more healthy for you. And fun to see places like Coeur and Spokane, Grain Shed in Spokane, and others now that are really doing this. A dear friend from California found out through our research that there was a grain native to what historians and biblical archaeologists believe was the Garden of Eden. And we found the grain that actually came from there. A whole big story. I won't unpack for you right now. She wants to mill this for the Diocese of San Francisco for communion bread. Well, Katherine tells us that the Palouse is a tapestry of woven connections. That's my theme for my remarks to you today. It's a thoroughly spiritual experience. It allows us to reflect, to gain solace. The beauty obscures this noise that's all around us, that we can really focus on what's important. And so, where do we go to find these, to establish in practical ways the recitation of these ancient grains? Well, thankfully, WSU has done great work on this. The USDA Germplasm Center, I met last Friday. Secretary of Agriculture Purdue, some of you may have read, was out here on a tour of the Pacific Northwest, and he's interested in these topics, so I had a chance to visit with Secretary Purdue, who, by the way, I found out was a grain farmer. I thought people from Georgia were all into peanuts and corn or something. Oh no, he's a red wheat grain farmer, and so that was interesting. And sometimes you have to get creative. I had to invoke my military association. I was the lowest ranking military person you can be, airman. I was airman, Charmin. But my son has done very well, Academy graduate, and gave me great pleasure to order Major Scheuerman to bring seed on a military transport from Scotland to the United States, because there's a lot of trouble with the border. We'll have to edit that out. And so we have found that there's a handful of places around the country doing things like this. And it's really been exciting to see this is starting to take off. And so we cooperate with each other because certain grains do better in certain parts of the world. And by the way, Anson Mills is one of the founders of this. And James Beard Winters, and they just have been very, very successful. And they had us out. I've spoken at their gatherings. And through them, we were introduced to Dan Barber, Blue Hill, probably the finest, well, one of the finest restaurants, I guess, in the United States, in the New York Rockefeller Stone Barn Center, where they understand the value of what we seek to do. How do you bring it to pass? Well, there are conventional ways of growing. There's organic biodynamic, and we're attempting what we call ag in the middle. Again, wanting to borrow from both traditions to lower inputs, but still have a sufficiently viable yield that this can be a successful business model. They all have their place, and we're seeking to do what we can to develop a holistic, positive relationship with the natural world. So our principles are to create these relationships through our growing methods with the land, as well as important economic goals for success, to value the land, and to do it in a way that we leave the land in a better condition than when we came to find it, and to promote the diversity of local landscapes and natural life forms. By the way, we had never seen a moose at Blues Colony Farm until about a year and a half ago. Again, I had grown up just over the hill from here. Actually, had never seen an elk there. You don't have to go too far to the east, and you do periodically hear some farmers see an elk moving through. And I was down visiting Don last fall, and leaving about dusk, and I looked off right about there, and I saw what appeared to be a big deer. And so I came back and I said to Don, "Wow, that's a big deer." And he came out, looked at it, and said, "That's an elk. That's an elk." And first time we'd ever seen one there. And we've lived there our whole life in that area, grew up there. And lo and behold, within about 2 weeks, guess what? There were 18 of them there. There was a herd there that stayed until the first day of hunting season. They got cleared out of hunting. But nice to see that happen. Well, in conclusion, just wanted to share with you the relevance, the health of landrace heritage grains, far higher in these important mineral levels than any modern grain. Significant genetic variation, which is a big factor in preventing disease, because farmers today are having to change their varieties regularly to stay ahead of rusts and other diseases. And here's my favorite thing. And to me, this is just, why isn't anybody doing this? So we're going to try the best we can. But those of you with commercial experience here, feel free to chime in here on how to make this happen. But just kind of like I was telling you, in the world of grain production, you go to whatever the store, and it's just sort of generic flour. That's just about all. You can get whole grain, but basically it's whole grain or just enriched, what we technically is called like extract, so we take a lot of fiber out. But that's about it. I went a couple of years ago. My wife Lois had surgery, and you can tell how desperate the Scheuerman household was because I had to cook. And so for about 6 weeks, I was the provider. And so I went into the pantry, and I love pancakes. So I was searching for some pancake flour. And we had something we had got from a trip somewhere that said crepe flour. I might even have a picture of it or something. And I looked on the ingredients, and it said, it just said it was generic flour, and I pulled out the next box that was some Swedish pancake mix or something, and it had the same ingredients, although it was priced more because it had a fancier label. And so was the pancake thing. It was all the same stuff. It was all the same stuff. They just put a different label all the time. Check the price. And so then I said, okay, I'm curious about this. So we went to an unnamed large pancake chain with the initials IHOP. And the server came, and I said, "Hey, I see you got on your menu here German pancakes, and it's right next to Belgian waffles and Swedish pancakes." I said, "So what is the difference in these?" And honestly, this is what the person said to me. He said, "You know what? It all comes from the same box sent to us from Texas." It's just about, I don't know how to do it. And I thought to myself, there really is a Belgian waffle grain. There really is a French crepe grain. There really is an American pancake grain. And you can be identity specific and create a quality food product that's associated with the variety. Just like I like a Gewürztraminer wine. It's specific to it. I don't like just going, "Hey, give me any white you got." No, it doesn't work for me. There's an interesting opportunity here to combine art and science and economics and all of the rest. And so this actually is white llamas. That's the earliest grain ever raised in the Pacific Northwest. I won't say American West because Sonora is a Spanish variety. Talk about a huge market. Probably the biggest one of any is our growing Hispanic population in American West. They love wheat flour tortillas, Indian flatbreads, which for all I know were first developed here in the Coeur d'Alene area. North Idaho, the missions here, they were big flatbread grain producers, and that's that grain. Finally, just to show you some of the interesting values with the mineral content. Look at these. These older varieties, the red indicates the highest mineral levels, the most healthy of all varieties. Modern hybrids, not a single category in those that are most essential for human health. Lots of things we can do. If you're like me, it's like, okay, how can I participate in this? Maybe I'm not a farmer, but I like bread or whatever. Put yourself anywhere. You can live in the city, you can live in suburbia, you can live in the country. You can take local action. You can be a responsible consumer. You can advocate politically for ways that would allow this kind of option to happen for American consumers. I've been interested in writing about this. If you're intrigued more, we have a website, palousheritage.com, that can tell you the history of all this in terms of agriculture in the Northwest. Put together a cookbook that has whole grain-based recipes for breads and soups. And because of good people like Katherine, I've become quite interested in the art story. And so Gary and I were recently in Russia, and we came to this incredible museum, which has these remarkable canvases. This is a work by Grigory Massagetov from the 1880s. It's called, well, the English translation is Time of Toil. Временная страда. And this is a life-size image. So this is probably about 7 feet high, maybe 12 feet wide. And talk about a story. I mean, you can just see, this is a family of reapers, the senior reaper, father figure in the front, kids, thistles that my father would have told me to go cut out of the field. And what a beautiful image. And so I just finished a 3-volume work that talks about the significance of agrarian themes in great art, in literature, and classical music. And so I don't really know what's going to happen with it. Nobody's jumping up and down to publish it, but boy, was it fun writing this thing. So I'm really grateful that you chose to come out and be with us here on a busy Saturday morning as we honor Katherine and the others whose art here is so beautifully displayed. Thank you again, Teresa and Blair, for hosting us. And I hope we've allowed some of these ideas also to reflect and bounce and come away from it in ways that somehow are enriching. Thanks again for being here. I think I went over that 30 minutes, but if you do have a question or two, yeah, happy to share publicly or one-on-one.
Considering the decades that go by, is there mineral depletion out of the soil?
Well, yes, there is, and you can't fault the American consumer or farmers for that. It's just a natural phenomenon that if you're pulling nutrients out of the soil. So, you know, we basically have 2 ways to renew that. One is through artificial inputs, so anhydrous ammonia, urea, you know, other things you would go to a farm supply store to put back into the ground. There is some debate on what's that doing to soil organisms. Is that compatible with the longer-term yield of the grains? The other way is the organic or biodynamic approaches, where you're going to have less yield because you're going to have what we call a green manure crop, a cover crop of some kind, or lentils that are natural nitrogen fixers that put those elements back into the ground. So over time, you're going to have less yield because you might have to spend a year on a 3-year cycle instead of a 2-year cycle putting that back in. Americans are famous, you know, for wanting budget-priced food, and so if you're doing that kind of farming, as today you'll see if you buy organic products, you'll have to pay more. Our position is you pay one way or another. If you pay for the cheapest thing out there, you know, you're robbing the soil of natural fertility, and this will not continue indefinitely because these are oil-based inputs. So they're more expensive and they're also limited. But you're also paying for your health because whole grains, a lot of people sort of stand back, cooks and others, you know, bakers, how do I deal with that? But in fact, whole grains have been part of, you know, the world culinary experience from the beginning of time. And when you take out the bran and the germ, you're removing the healthiest part of this. And so it makes good sense to take advantage of what Mother Earth has in terms of those elements and provides that in the food product.
So I'd love to take a walk with you through the gallery and talk about some of the pieces and how they relate to your heritage. And we'll start, this particular piece here is, I started out with a drawing in graphite. It's 22 by 30. And over time decided it would be fun to convey the airiness and the loftiness and the beauty and tranquility of standing in a wheat field. So I created this image. It's multi-layered, and as it moves, it has that sort of feeling and sensation that I experienced. This particular grain is taller and beautiful, and when you look at it closely, you start to understand how all of those components fit together. So that was sort of the inspiration with this. I found this field out at the DeLong farm. Sarah was very gracious and brought me out there. Sarah and Joe DeLong have an older farm as well, heritage farm, and it's been in the family since forever. There's also an image way in the back that is about her property, and there's an enormous rock wall on her property and flat ground where they plant the grains and plow and all of those things. And go out there, and I've never been in a place like that. I had taking all these research pictures, and I had them spread out all over the table, and my son looked at them and he said, "Wow, Mom, that's really cool." I'm like, yeah, this is really cool. So we need to bring this type of imagery out so the folks can see it. Even they're not going to be able to see it themselves unless they get that special connection in that tour. And she's extremely gracious, so while that happened, she's also a working farmer. So I felt very privileged to be able to go out there and visit it and pay tribute to her farm. Also to the grain. Up here we have an Egyptian barley, purple Egyptian barley. Don talks a lot about purple Egyptian barley and his connections and the artisanal products that they're making out the grain shed and his partnerships with Sean Duffy and the brewers out there, and how they create these artisanal beers and properties that these different types of grains create and taste sensations. And I just love all that innovation and that artisanal part of it, and I felt that that was a way to convey that, and for kids as well, to see that, you know, a stalk of wheat isn't just a stalk of wheat. There's so many different varieties. Don also mentioned to me the grain gathering, and I went out there last year for the first time, and that was like a dream come true for me. Here I was in the middle of all these folks that spent a lifetime on grain, and I was just really kind of getting immersed in all the different possibilities, and I was able to see how people innovated and worked together, and there was this wonderful sense of collaboration, and I admire that immensely, collaboration to create community. And I think that kids don't really understand what goes on in their food and how to grow food unless they've grown up on a farm. My grandmother grew up on a farm. She was one of 9. She and my grandfather came here from Denmark. They went back and forth during World War II on a cargo ship and landed here. They were both sponsored. They came over here engaged, and they managed a farm for one of the governors in Massachusetts. Somebody ran for governor, and I saw them as very hardworking people. So, and I feel that they really value growing things, and I value that. I value those contributions, and that's why I spend a lot of time working on agricultural images. It's not just about Palouse, it's about hardworking people, it's about innovation, it's about collaboration, creating community, and leaving something behind for others to appreciate. Art is a way of joining the past and the future. And so when you walk through a museum and you're seeing all kinds of beautiful things, there are many stories, and I've had that privilege of teaching children, and they make those connections, and they love it.
Katherine, can I say one thing about purple Egyptian? This is another good example of an intersect between heritage and aesthetics and commerce. The maltsters, go crazy over this grain. We haven't had a lot, but it's unusually high sugar content, and it's hulless. It's a rare hulless variety. So it's a complicated step when you have to take an indigestible hull off of something, because you could bake it with this. Also, you can grind it into a flour. And so purple Egyptian is kind of close to our heart because it also came from South Russia. It was native to there. Our people raised this before with the turkey red. There was no bread grain in America until the mid-1800s. They all made bread out of soft white wheat, which was creating a brick. They had it, but it was not until our people brought these grains from southeastern Europe that things really changed. And grains like this can have a huge impact on the craft brewing industry in the country.
I also think one of the reasons I made this is Dawn talks about it a lot, and that's all that innovation and that creativity. When I went to the grain gallery, I was able to see all of these varieties of grain. Steve Lyons, Steve Jones, the things that they're doing out there. Steve Lyons said to me, go ahead, go out in the fields and grab some grains. So I came out with like 28 different varieties, which could be easily over a year's worth of drawing and inspecting and looking. And I love all the different variations between it. I love that there's a broader leaf and there's a deep root system, and that there are incredible tines, and that all those little kernels fit together, and that in a sense creates community. So this one's called Barley Heads. And the reason why it's all about this enthusiastic group of people who create neat stuff for us to consume and to enjoy. Yes, Don?
I might also add the intersect with the economic side, that in supporting your local farmers that are interested in transitioning to healthy soil, healthy children in life, that in supporting not even ours, but a lot of these other local artisanal folks that are doing regenerative or organic agronomic methods. It's important to go support those guys, you know, financially as well, because that's really what it's an essential piece to this if you're interested in a transitional move. And so I'll throw in a plug. We opened a brand new brewery and bakery in Spokane, myself and a couple of friends. And so support those kind of things with beer, whole grain breads, and not the least of which, as of 2 weeks ago, Adam's restaurant right here, Honey Social, is using that grain in their salads, their salads. So we're pleased with these local folks supporting things that we're doing. There's a big tension in moving out of these kind of existing paradigms, whether you're a chemical farmer or a biological farmer. And we choose biological in contrast to chemical.
So last year I went to Bellwether and met you guys in the summer for a beer, and I had one of Tom Crosby's beers that was made with the purple Egyptian, and he added the lavender essence to it. And there were different variations. It was so amazing. And I was like, I plan a trip once a year, maybe if I'm lucky, twice a year to come back. Just had all this anticipation about trying what you were creating, because, you know, to me it's important, that farm to table connection. And I love beer. I mean, I lived in Belgium for a while. Beer was amazing, and it talks about terroir and all the different tastes, and that relates to the land and all the movement and nutrients in the land and the environment, and how landrace is really unique, and how each batch of bread, Sean talks about, can be slightly different from the other. That's because of the terroir. I didn't know any of this 4 years ago. This has really been an interesting journey, learning and connecting and finding meaning. But above all, I found a way that I think that I can help convey that. Obviously, imagery really impacts children, and that's probably one of my top priorities, is to try to leave something that children can relate to, you know, and at all different levels. Otherwise, they walk through a museum and they kind of look at what they're looking at. They need to know the deeper story. And that's another reason why I'm creating these layered fabric pieces. We'll talk about Infinity that's upstairs shortly. But this you recognize this piece.
This is the colony, what we call the colony. And so this was the nucleus of our people's life. By the way, today there are at least 100,000 people living in the inland northwest of this Russian-German background. Many of them, Mary and I both have sides of our family that went to Canada. And you might know the Coffin Ross, the name of folks associated with Dry Fly. Yeah, they also came here. They lived in this area and started spreading out. Anyway, the reason I'm telling you this is because this is the oldest granary in the region down there. And it's owned by our neighbor. You see, it's on the north side of the river. So I keep hoping that in a moment of weakness, they'll let me buy that and pull it over to our side. Of course, there is a river there that makes it a little tough. But it's on skids. And so they obviously built it so it was movable, but it's quite an icon of really our people's experience.
So the first time I saw that landscape, just running over the landscape coming down, I was just thrilled. There's a road that runs along here.
Yep. That's that road to.
We walked out here to the granary and looked across the river at Palouse Colony, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then I started thinking about how do you use a combine up and down that hill, and how courageous that might be, and all the different risks that was involved, planting and also harvesting. And then it's really the way it was. I go out and do research photography, and somehow through that process, it becomes abstract. So first you see the species abstractly, and then perhaps you see the granary, and then you realize the scale. So the other thing I'm loving about the Palouse is the possibility for aerial photography. So last Christmas, my husband, who's been very supportive of my art career, bought me a drone, which I'm learning to use. And he saw this piece in my studio. It's not from a drone photo. It's from across the property above the hill, Palouse Colony. But I see the drone possibilities. There's a steep learning curve with the drone and not crushing it, but I'm working on it. So, good question.
When was that grant rebuilt?
You know, I asked an elder down, a family elder, and they thought around 1900. So it's 20 years after our people settled there, but they were the ones who put it together.
Is it still functional, or can you guys restore?
You know, it's actually in pretty good shape. I'm surprised. There's evidence. I did sneak inside, and yeah, there is evidence of coyotes, chewing a little bit of the wood here and there. But you could probably clean that place up and still use it. I mean, the best thing is that they did put it on skids, so it's off the ground, probably 1.5 feet. Had they put it in the ground, being of wood, it would have rotted. And the nice thing about the property down there is they were forward thinking enough to put good roofs on the buildings, and then some, so they're not rotting away. We have the barns designated the state historic site, which probably wouldn't have worked if they were all falling apart. And then that one's up on the ground. And so it was nice that they thought ahead enough to do that. It was a clearinghouse. You see, people would come and they'd stay there after they came from the old country for, a couple